So, welcome to another Psychology for Geeks panel. And I am very excited to be joining by two, and I will say Star Wars experts, because I am not. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Dr. Kelli Dunlap. I'm a licensed and practicing clinical psychologist. I currently work as the community director at Taitz, which is the oldest and longest running mental health nonprofit dedicated to serving the game spaces. So from game players to game developers, studios, content creators, and everyone in between. And my last little bona fide is I also have a master's in game design, and I make games and I teach games, and my expertise in Star Wars will maybe largely come not just from the movies but the games too. But that's the perspective I'll be bringing to this discussion.
Wow. Okay, hold on. I think I would like to pause and just take that all in. And I was like, this is amazing. I was like, I didn't even consider the Star Wars. Like, you know so much. This is going to be so fun. Okay. Oh, great.
How fast for me to follow. But
we can always edit and swap it if you want.
No. We need that out there. People need to know how amazing you are. Hello, everybody. My name is Benjamin Taitz. I am a psychology doctoral candidate graduating next month. I'm trying to get my last 2 chapters done, and so I'm hoping I can defend in March, but I've had some barriers and roadblocks. So, but graduating this year, for sure, it will be this year.
Well, congratulations. That's a massive achievement. Good for you.
Thank you. I am a registered psychological associate here in beautiful sunny Orange County, California, where I work in clinical and forensic psychology. And I am the co-host of 2 mental health related podcasts. One is called Mental Health Quest, the Therapist Office and Beyond, where myself and my co-host, Charlene McPherson, discuss what is therapy, what do these diagnoses look like, and what do treatments look like, just to kind of educate and decrease stigma. And then my other podcast is called My Hero Therapy, where myself and my co-host, Dr. Nicole Hassler, go deep dive into the psychology of the My Hero Academia anime and learn how we can be heroes IRL.
I love the stinger.
Yeah. I try.
Awesome. All right. So I would like to know your origin story. How did you get started in how did you start falling in love with Star Wars, with the Star Wars universe?
Oh, wow.
Geez.
No one's ever asked me that before. Oh my gosh. Okay. We're both like
for me, I think go ahead and start first, because it's super fast for me. So I started. I feel like I feel like almost like an initiated geek, because my brother, I've come to realize, is the one that has introduced me to pretty much everything that is geeky that I love now. But he was like the originator of everything, the instigator. And now he's into he's like, you know what's really interesting? Warhammer 40K. And I was like, no, we do not need another fandom. No, we already have too many fandoms to follow. Please, no. So I think I was already either in high school. Yes, I was in high school, because the Clone Wars animated series was happening, and that's when I started paying attention. Before then, to be honest, I had not seen any of the movies. And then when I was in college, that's when I binge all of them. But I didn't know anything, so I started backwards. So I started with the prequels first, and then I went. And
chronological order.
Since then, I sort of slowly started, I continue watching the movies. But it was, I was already an adult, teenager when I started my journey.
And I think that's what makes it so tough, is because I can't remember a time when Star Wars didn't exist in my life. I'm scrambling through my brain for my oldest Star Wars memory. And my family had this large steamer trunk in our living room that had all of our Disney VHS, the hard plastic, those old school 80s VHSs. But also in there, we had the VHS. Of course, there were 2 VHSs in one Star Wars box. And so I can remember that. And I can clearly remember when the special edition came out, because the boxes were gold. And I remember things looked different. And I don't remember what year that was, but I I couldn't have been older than like 7 or 8 at the time. And so I honestly don't remember how I got introduced. Maybe it was my older brother. Maybe it was Star Wars playing on like TNT or some random TV channel like it often did. So too young to have seen it in theaters, but it's always been there in the collection of movies that my family would watch.
Yeah,
So for
I
you, it
think
was more like a family inheritance. Like you inherited like the family. Were your
Yeah,
parents
like mental
also like
illness.
great
Yeah.
fans? No.
So no,
No.
my parents were not fans. Actually, my dad, I still don't think he's ever seen it.
Oh,
But
okay.
maybe the tie-in here is that we're getting real deep into my lore. My parents met because they both worked at Disneyland.
oh,
Oh,
And
okay.
they both worked on the Star Tours ride at some point.
oh.
And so maybe that's how the VHSs came into our life, because they worked on the ride and maybe they got copies or something. I honestly don't know. Like that is before my memory crystallized. Yeah,
So
it's
it was
something that's always
destiny for
existed.
you to be like a Star Wars expert. I see. Okay.
Yes,
The
Star Wars
force
and
was
Disney
flowing
expert.
through your family.
My
There we go.
Yes.
midichlorians were primed. Yes.
Yes. I mean, I also can't really like remember exactly when I first was introduced to Star Wars. I think also maybe high school-ish. Um, I can't tell you like the specific like which one I saw first or whatever. Um, it's just like as far as my brain is concerned, it's always been there in my life.
Mhm.
I will say that I never was fully like super geeky about it.
Oh, okay.
Growing up, um, my main geekiness was Harry Potter. So that was like,
Mhm.
that was only like externally geeky thing that you would know about me. But I mean, I like Star Wars. And then I think I really fully got into it like yeah, high schoolish time when the Clone Wars series was coming out. And I like rewatched the movies to kind of contextualize it all. And then I remember like in college I started reading all the Legends novels because like I wanted to know what happened after episode 6.
Mhm.
And at that time there wasn't the sequel stuff, which we don't mention. But there was the Legends novels, which really went deep into like the world building and the character development and the philosophy in it. And I think that's like what really kind of got me. So I want to say, let's say like end of high school, college-ish time is when like the real nerdiness for Star Wars started. But like it was always just something that I would watch. Like if it was on TV, I would watch it. If it was, something Star Wars, yeah, sure, I would go. But it was only like in college that I really would start delving deeper into it. And even to this day, I have these like with my like fandom interests, I can only like have like one thing at a time in my brain. And so I would need to like just I can only focus on one thing at a time. So if there's a new Star Wars stuff coming out, then I will like rewatch all the stuff. I will reread all the novels that I can, just to kind of get my brain primed for Star Wars. And then depending on which other fandom has a new thing coming out, I have to switch. So the problem comes from that is if things are coming so close together that then my brain is just like, no, too much nerdiness overload.
Kelly, have you also read any of the novels?
Some of them, and that was probably when I was in high school. So it's been a hot minute, but a little bit. So some of the novels I've seen. Obviously, I've seen all of the movies. I've seen most of the one-off shows, not all of them. Having children really distracts from having fandoms. Very different children with different needs, both intensive. And played the games. Like that was really my. If we're going to talk about like obscure lore, it probably comes from the games that I've played. Whether it's Knights of the Old Republic or the Lego Star Wars games, just all those different ones that are out there. I also actually on my phone at this moment have the game Heads Up, where you put the phone on your head and it has like prompts and people have to get you to guess the prompt. I have the Star Wars version of that and I crush at it. So yeah, like it's not something I ever intensely focused on, but just something I absorbed along the way and have enjoyed. Probably my most hardcore fandom is Halo. I also really like Star Trek. So apparently there's something with space that just captures my imagination and my interest.
It's the final frontier.
It is. I wasn't sure if I'd be allowed to say that on a Star Wars themed podcast, so I was going to hold on to it. So now when they come, they're going to come for you.
Yeah, that's okay. When we did a Star Wars panel at LA Comic-Con, my older brother wore my Starfleet uniform to the panel just to mess with people. I considered doing it, but I was like, yeah, no. No.
We don't need to poke the bear. It's okay.
You know what? I love both. There's plenty to love for both. If anybody wants to try to come at me, I will just welcome you with love. And, welcome logic. But mainly
You're
love.
ready. Yeah, because so in high school, like my main thing that got me started into like any fandoms was reading. That's what I like. So I remember seeing, I just wanted to consume anything that was like fiction. And I remember seeing the Star Wars books, but they all look super complicated. So I never touched them. Like I was like, I don't know any of these characters. I don't remember anything. So I never got around to that. But now we have, because I know there's even comics, right? Available now. So is it my understanding? Like I would just think that it's kind of like the Marvel universe where everything is connected, like the books, the movies, the shows, everything is sort of connected, right? So everything canon
they're trying
or
to. I think they're trying to connect it all. To kind of give more options to like go deeper into different elements of the Star Wars universe. I wouldn't say that they're all actually connected, but they're trying to connect it. I like that there are more Star Wars media options available. I do appreciate that they are doing that. Like I'm like you, Elizabeth. I like books, so like the new novels, I will read them. Comics, I don't really read comics as much, and so like I started to like read them online, but then I realized the comics were the exact same stories as the novels. Just comic. Like it was word for word the same. So I was like, well, then why should I read the comic when I can read the book? Which it's fine, it's good. Some people like the comic aspects of it, and there definitely are some comics that aren't novel versions as well. So like, it's kind of like yes and no. It's connected and it's not connected.
I mean, it comes down to fandom. Like there are some purists who say if it's not in the movie, it's not canon.
Yeah.
Like anything outside the movie and maybe begrudgingly the sanctioned TV series, canon. And so like it really actually was my partner, his comment was the books are just fan fiction. They're not canon. Now that could start a fight and he may have changed his mind. Like that was his position a while ago. But yeah, I think you can't answer that question with addressing the fact that some fandom is very protective and like, I don't want to say gatekeeping, but really protective of this is the core work.
They were protected with lightsabers.
Yeah, and some of it is fan fiction. I mean, like, fan fiction is legitimate too. So I don't want, please don't hear me like dissing on fan fiction. Some of the best stories I've read have been fan fiction. And so this idea of like canon and everything is related in the same universe, I think it depends on like how precious you want to hold to it. And I would always encourage people to like, it's trying to tell a similar story. Like it is a galaxy far, far away. It is ultimately about, the struggle of dark and light, is about family. It's about relationship. It's about connection. And it's about a future that we could only possibly imagine. And if you can come at it with that kind of perspective, then the fact of like, well, this is canon and this is not kind of fades away a little bit. And that way we can all just enjoy what we enjoy without passing judgment on if it's real or not.
Yeah.
I think I changed my perspective on what was canon and what wasn't when I went, I think several years ago, I went to a panel when they were talking about it was cosplay. So cosplay is one of the things where I kind of sort of been lurking in that fandom, but not really like attempted, like it's kind of overwhelming. Because like there's some people out there that are like make fantastic like cosplay. So I'm like, that's what I want. I don't want the other ones, but I also don't want to spend the time making or learning all these things. So that makes it hard. But there was a comment that somebody said where I guess there was like people who go like frame by frame when they're trying to like look at the costumes and they're like trying to recreate it. And I guess like that particular person was talking to someone who works on set. I think it was like for Doctor Who, I believe. And they were like, nah, it changes because sometimes they forget or like they change something, so it's not always the same, because it's a different day, a different shooting or whatever. And then that's when I started realizing, I was like, oh, there isn't something that's like this is like the one costume that they wear, like even if he has like little tiny details that are different, it's still like, it's still the Doctor, it's still whoever you are cosplaying. And then after that I was like, it just makes me happy. Like if the books make you happy, if the comics makes you happy, then that's fine. Like Ben said, like I'm happy that there's like different like media, like forms of it. So like people who only like watching movies can enjoy it, people who like reading can enjoy it, people who like comics can enjoy it, and people who like just playing the games can enjoy it. And I think that that's great. But now I kind of, this was not a question I was going to ask, but I feel like maybe we should address, which is the idea of having sort of like that gatekeeping happening, or like that toxic fandom sometimes, especially for people who are trying to like coming into the fandom, that can be quite harmful.
Yeah, I mean, and we see this with almost every fandom, unfortunately, which in my mind defeats the purpose of fandom, because the whole purpose of fandom is for you to enjoy this thing that we like. Like, we both like Star Wars. Who's to say that your way of liking it is better than mine? Like Kelly has said, like, we just like it differently. Like, let me enjoy it my way. I've come across this a lot, because you'll always meet some people at Comic Cons that they can have such in-depth knowledge, and then well, if you don't know this, then you're not a real fan. It's like, that doesn't even logically make sense. Like, the definition of a fan is someone who just enjoys this whatever. So why are you trying to push that away from me? Especially, for something like Star Wars, where people would like to joke with the whole, Obi-Wan quote of only Sith deal in absolutes, which in and of itself is an absolute statement. But like, fans will be like, oh, if you're not like exactly this, then you're, bad. It's like, and you say that dressed as a Jedi, which is supposed to embody openness and acceptance of all life forms. Um, you're acting very Sith-like there. So I feel like, unfortunately, there are always going to be people who, are very toxic in their fandom attachments. I will not excuse any behaviors. I will explain it as something about this fandom means something so strongly to them that it scares them to have it change. And that's the way I have to explain it to myself, so that way I can just accept them where they're at. If that is their attachment, that's their attachment. I attach to Star Wars differently.
Yeah, and that's something that I recognize too, where for a lot of, because I have like arguments with my siblings about like his favorite character is Hulk, or one of his favorite characters is Hulk, and he's like, the movies like destroy his story, it was so much better like in the comics or whatever. And then I have like a great attachment to Loki as a character, and I'm like, every single movie I was like, but he's so much better than they portrayed. And I like with the Loki series, I was like, yeah, exactly. That's how I've always envisioned him, right? But then I think we are like, I guess the Loki fandom got Loki in that like lucky in that sense where the character had enough of a story to like continue like that character growth. But there are fandoms where it's very limited what you have. And if that's kind of what you grew up with, that was a place that you felt safe, and all of a sudden all these people are coming in and changing it and like, you know, creating more books or more storylines that don't really make sense or don't really connect with what you love, then it can be difficult because you're threatening my safe space now.
Well, it's also difficult because sometimes it's not threatening a safe space. It is threatening your misogyny. It's threatening your sexism. It's threatening your racism. Again, thinking directly about Star Wars and the latest ones that came out, it's not prequels. Are they called postquels?
No,
like,
those are sequels.
Sequels. I'm like, I'm a doctor, guys. Sequels. Like the fact that people raged that there could possibly be women pilots, and that women, like, you know, in the original Star Wars, there was one woman, and that was Leia, and that was it. That was it. There were no other women characters. Do not come at me with the books. Like on screen, speaking parts, there were no other women. Women can't be stormtroopers because of all the clones, and like there's always a reason for it. And so if it is changing to become more inclusive, people use their fandom as a way to reestablish these hatreds they have, not just of the fandom changing, but for the people who are coming into the fandom. I know I have felt this really personally as, you know, a woman who plays video games. I used to play first-person shooters competitively, and I would show up into gaming spaces. This is like 2009. You know, we're talking over a decade ago, and people would look at me and tell me I don't belong because I'm a girl, and obviously I must not know how to play games. I'm only here to get a boy. Like it's, and so in that way, the gatekeeping, like I think the best perspective is what you said, Elizabeth, is people and Ben too, like trying to understand where they are and where they're at, and understanding that change is hard. And like this idea of us versus them is ingrained so deeply in our psychology, and it's not just nerd fandoms. I mean, look at football. People get real mad about, you know, the Chiefs versus the 49ers, or as a massive soccer fan, like watching Arsenal play Man U. Like people have literally died in these rivalries in their fandoms. And so at one point you are fighting a little bit of basic human us versus them, in group versus out group kind of psychology. But then there's also here are my personal prejudices, and I'm going to project them onto this material so that I can continue to have the worldview that I have, where I am the ultimate. And then there's people like you two who are like, but it's okay. We can accept and understand that change is hard. And it can be difficult to have something that you love that doesn't live up to your expectations. And so trying to balance all of that, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on. There's a lot of different thoughts, different feelings that we have to hold at the same time. And that's just a lot of cognitive load and emotional load that people either don't want to or don't have the capacity to hold on to. And so gatekeeping in that respect is just, it's really complicated. And there are toxic fandoms, and there are people who are going to be really mean. There's also really amazing, you know, within the same fandom, really amazing groups who have very different ways of looking at things and how they bring people in. So, you know, being able to understand that the Star Wars fandom contains infinite multitudes. There is no one Star Wars fandom. I think that can be really helpful in people navigating and finding that space where they do feel like they fit and they do feel like they belong.
There's another thing I'm curious, like for people who are either like new to the fandom or sort of like a lurker like I am, like how or what are some key things that you would recommend people look out for to find those safe people, like those safe spaces to like geek out with other people, and how to like set those boundaries to avoid interacting with, you know, the toxic sort of part of the fandom?
I think, if I may, you know, because as we've established, there will be those unfortunate toxic people there. But there are, for as many toxic people there are those that are really open and accepting, and they're like, oh my God, you're just getting into it. Okay, let me help you with this. Let me welcome you in. And I think it's really important for new people in any new fandom, because I mean, I've been a new person in a fandom. I mean, just even recently, all the Marvel stuff, I only just recently started getting into it in the last, like, I don't know, 5 years or so. So I've been lucky that the people who I've asked about it have been very welcoming. And I think just an important point to if you are new to any fandom, if someone is going to be negative, well, then they're not going to be the person that you want to guide you in your journey. You want to have your Obi-Wan. You don't want Sidious.
Unless you do, and then
in which case, then we can talk further.
That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for,
yeah. There's nothing wrong with, what, I will actually say this, and it might be a little bit of a hard take. So I remember I was working as a social worker in a psychiatric hospital, and I had a client that he really liked Star Wars, but he specifically really loved the Sith and the dark side. And he was saying that, like, he doesn't like telling people that because people judge him for it, because the Sith is bad. It's like, no, the Sith aren't bad per se. The Sith are attempting to meet their needs in a different way than the Jedi. And the philosophy of the Sith about letting emotions out developed specifically because the Jedi were so restrictive. So if you want to release your emotions, fine. We can release our emotions. We can be angry. That is a normal human emotion to have. How are we expressing that anger is the difference here. Because there are plenty of instances of in Legends, because my Star Wars journey started with Legends, so I will always go back to Legends. But there's plenty of instances of Dark Jedi and Sith-esque, Sith-adjacent characters that, yeah, they'll be very angry, but they don't just kill everyone in sight just because they're angry. And I could argue even with the new sequel, Kylo Ren, he got angry, but he specifically only beat up desks and chairs and machines that could not be hurt. He didn't kill any of his soldiers. He didn't kill, any of the troopers that were around that just happened to be the bearers of bad news. So he actually, though he struggled with his anger, he was directing it in a, harm reduction kind of way. Like, okay, well, I have anger, but I don't want to hurt these people that I'm working with. So I'll just destroy this desk. I'll destroy the console. The console can be repaired. And so I would point out to my clients, like, it's fine to be angry. It's absolutely fine. It's just, how do we want to do it? So I think I lost track of what I was saying. This is what happens when you get me talking about things.
No, I was just talking about, like, how do we know which will be like safer fandoms, because so part of what Psychology for Geeks is attempting to reduce like all the stigma that is placed on like fandoms or just geek culture in general, and creating that's okay and creating safe spaces for people to geek out together, right? Like, that's why I'm having like all these panels for people to have a greater understanding of how we can use them for our mental health. Hello.
Arno's foundling.
Yes, my youngling. But I mean, at least in terms of like finding the group where you feel seen and you feel heard. Like, no one should ever give you a litmus test. Yeah. I can remember one of my very first interviews when I started doing like psychology and game stuff, was like 10 years ago. Someone put me on the spot to recite the Konami code, which in game spaces is it's really famous. It has to do with the Nintendo system. And growing up, my parents never let me have a Nintendo. I only had Sega. And so I'm on the spot in front of all these people, and my cheeks are going super red because I don't know the Konami code off my head perfectly, like, A, B, whatever it is. And that felt awful. Like, you're giving me basically a test to see if I'm geek enough. But did you ever think that maybe that wasn't my fandom? That wasn't what qualifies me to speak as an expert on games, if I know this cheat code or not, when I never even had access to that system. I mean, it is part of the game culture, and so I have since learned it just in case it ever happened again. But yeah, there shouldn't be a knowledge check.
Yeah.
He agrees.
He agrees. And then you should also, I always look for things like, oh, you haven't played X? What you want to look for is, I am so happy for you that you get to experience that for the first time. Let me know if you need anything or you have any questions. That's a very green flag. Red flag would be, you haven't played X? Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It doesn't even have to be mean. Like, they're not saying anything mean, but just the like, somehow you are not as geek enough, or you are not enough in some way because you have not done this one thing. Like, I've never seen The Godfather, and I have a film friend who's like, gasp and whatever, and it's like, well, no, it's just not something that's ever come up for me. It doesn't mean that I can't enjoy cinema. It just means I haven't seen that one piece. Whereas a friend can be like, oh my gosh, we're going to sit down, we're going to have popcorn, we're going to talk through, we're going to let you experience it, and then we'll watch it again and we'll talk through it. And like, being excited for the person coming into that space, whether they're a newbie or whether they have experience, that's what you want to be looking for. That's what makes it welcoming. So it doesn't even have to be toxic. It just has to be excited for you to be part of that community.
I think, and to go back with like, if someone really wants to experience the Sith side of things, great. That's an important part of Star Wars lore to understand. And, one thing I like to say to people, if someone is like, oh, well, but, they need to know all these things to be a geek. I was like, well, when you started, did you know all of those things? No, you had to start from somewhere. And so, all aspects of the fandom are available for all fans who want to experience them. Some people really hold true to the original stuff. Cool. It's like with Pokemon. The Pokemon fandom is the Gen 1ers. Where it's like, if it's not Gen 1, then it's like
it's fan fiction.
Well, you know what? And as Kelli said, fan fiction is just as valid, because how did any fiction come about if not from some person thinking it up? And there are plenty of instances of actual like current fandoms that started off as a fan fiction, like Twilight. What started off as a fan fiction, and then it became its own thing. Not that I like Twilight; it's not my thing. Cool. You like it, great. But fan fiction is just as valid, because all fans have that innate desire to immerse ourselves in the world. I mean, I've written fan fiction. I've read a lot of fan fiction, and I really enjoy it because it allows me to explore the universe from a different perspective. Whether it be a Star Wars fan fiction, Harry Potter, Star Trek, Marvel, whatever, this is just an extension of the universe, and it doesn't make it any less or more valid than something else.
Do you think that now it's changed? Because this is just my own personal thing. Haven't really talked to other people about it, but because now the Marvel universe introduced this idea of like different universes, and now anything you can think of is technically canon, because it could just be from like a different universe where that happened. Like, that gave me like a whole different perspective for all my other fandoms as well. Do you think that changed anything within the Star Wars fandoms?
I mean, I will say, when the new canon material came out, when Disney bought the Star Wars franchise, that's what they did. The Legends novels, they're called Legends, and it's expanded universe. Basically, it was considered to be an alternate timeline. It was considered to be an alternate universe, an alternate exploration of the Star Wars galaxy. Even before Disney bought out, that's what it was called. It was called Star Wars Expanded Universe. They never claimed that it was canon. The authors of all those novels, which, by the way, all those novels were approved by George Lucas before they were published. He just never officially said that it was canon, because it wasn't his thing. It was their interpretation of it, and he was like, yeah, I like that, and it fits well with this. And he would interact with a lot of the authors to give ideas on how to bring things together. So when people will say, oh well, the expanded universe isn't canon, like, no, of course not. It's a different exploration of the universe, but is also one that the creator of Star Wars did not reject. And what I like to tell a lot of people is, like, if you love the work that this creator did, then why can't we also accept the work that he liked, that he accepted? You know, just because he didn't create it doesn't make it any less exciting. I love the Legends novels. You know, there's so much more to it, and it's just it is fan fiction. These authors are like, hey, I love Star Wars so much, I want to write a book about it. And George Lucas was like, cool, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is I don't think Marvel. I could be wrong for the Marvel bros out there. I don't think Marvel invented the idea of like an infinite multiverse. And that is something that probably dates back to like the earliest sci-fi writings in some respects. But that's not where my scholarship is. So I'm going to let that lie out there. I think we're attracted to the idea where everything could come together, because like watching all these different Marvel movies and all of a sudden they click and you have those moments, they're so satisfying to like see these different things come together. And we saw that in the Star Wars series too. Like, oh, it's that character, I know them from this thing over there, and like that connection is really powerful. The opposite side of that is when we try to force a single perspective, it's really damaging. It's really stifling of like, well, that can't possibly exist because it doesn't fit in my timeline.
Yeah.
And, as humans, we want things to be streamlined. We like nice, clean buckets. We want clear categorization, but life isn't that way. And when you look at like even history, just human history, we can't even agree on how things unfolded. So I think when we try to hold that expectation of uniformity to our fandoms and our universes, we're really doing a disservice to the creators and to creativity in general. But I understand why people want it, because one, it's a really great payoff, it's a really fun fan service, and it helps keep things, it helps lighten that cognitive load. I don't have to hold that this exists in one sense and this exists in another sense and those worlds are warring. Well, no, look, they fit together now. My brain's really happy about that. But again, I do think that that's limiting. So it's this really tough balance that creators have to strike when they're dealing with these massive franchises.
Yeah, and I think the argument about the like, oh, it's not canon and stuff like that, really, and to go back to my previous thing about like that George Lucas would talk to these authors writing these legend novels, and like he's not saying it's canon because it's not his creation. Canon is his creation. That's how that works. But he never rejected stuff. And now look, they're bringing Legends characters into canon. Thrawn was a big deal in Legends novels, and that's where he originated. And now they're bringing him into canon, and a lot of fans are really excited about that because they read that fan fiction, and oh my gosh, now here I can see him in a different way. And I love it. They wrote some author in the new canon novels or canon compliant novels that Disney is sponsoring. There's like a series of novels that talk about like Thrawn's history and how he became Grand Admiral Thrawn, and it differs a little bit from the Legends, but actually not that much if you really think of it, if you go back. But I actually like it just as much because it's just a different perspective of Thrawn's upbringing. Now everybody can enjoy this character that previously only people who read the Legends novels knew about.
So I watched this series on YouTube where they explain like the major like books, like the major novels, and I really like that at the end of each YouTube video they say, keep in mind that this is one perspective, because this is like, if I read it once, this is what I get out of the book. If I read it multiple times, I can get a different thing every single time, because you're a different person, because you notice the extra things. So I really like that, like everyone has like a different perspective of what it is, and it's okay. Like you can have your own perspective, just like having that boundary of like, I respect yours and please respect mine, and we can have a conversation. Like I have friendly arguments with my siblings all the time about, how Loki is superior than everyone else. And do not believe me, I don't, but in my head, that's like my thing. And like we will argue about things, but like we're not going to like stop having like a sibling relationship or anything, or like hate each other for having a different perspective. And I love that idea, because the three of us can go see the same movie and we would all pay attention to something different. We'll all come up with like something slightly different. We're gonna connect to something different, and that's okay. That's great. Like that's what's so good about it. Because my best memories about when I was in like starting grad school, the thing that got me through grad school was spending like watching those Marvel movies, the Star Wars movies with my friends, and then hanging out and like psychoanalyzing everything that happened. Like it was so fun. And now that like the new movies are coming out, I forget the new movies are coming out, because like all my friends are like, sadly, we're all adults and everybody has their own life and lives like everywhere in the country. So it makes it impossible. So like now I don't really have those memories. But for me, it was like being part of a fandom meant spending time with my friends and hanging out. Like that's why I love going to Comic-Con and like standing in line for hours and hours, because I'm hanging out with my friends. So this is fun,
I have something similar, is that I actually really, my intense nerdiness about Star Wars and Marvel and really everything except for Harry Potter, because that predated it, came from psychology and my work in the mental health field. Which like, yeah, I liked Star Wars before and I knew of Marvel stuff before. Like, I liked X-Men a lot, but like I was never so passionate until I learned that you can have psychology and geek stuff. Like when I first got introduced to the whole geek therapy concept, or the superhero therapy concept, I was just like, what now? And then I just like dove into it. Because I was always the kind of person that would like analyze the characters. And now this was just an option for me to like explore this fandom in my now professional way. And I mean, I'm turning it, I don't know if it will fully be my career or not, but like my dissertation is on, exploring the incorporation of geek culture into therapy to see if it like helps to build rapport. And it does.
It does. Can confirm. Lived personal experience and one.
There's not a lot of literature on it. We need more research. We need more research, though, because I have not found any research about it specifically. So my entire like discussion section is needs more research. Please let me do more research.
If you need a professional interview, hit me up. I'll be a resource. What is it? Not a first person resource.
I'm gonna kvetch a little bit right here. That was originally supposed to be my research method, was to interview people about it, but IRB shot me down because they claimed that there's a concern that these participants will disclose confidential information about their clients.
Well, the fun thing is that if it's not research, it is a friendship conversation between the two of us, where you happen to contact an expert in the field who actively uses geek culture in her own personal private practice. Then you know what? IRB, it's not for you, honey. This isn't research.
Yeah, well, I need to get this.
I don't want to add to your dissertation.
Yes.
Primary source, that's the word.
Sometime between now and New Year's.
Well, let me just validate you that especially with video games in particular, like I call it my easy rapport button. I've
experienced it myself as a
countless
clinician.
Examples.
I've experienced it, especially Star Wars. Star Wars is one of the fandoms that has allowed me to build rapport with so many clients. I mentioned that client in the hospital I work with. My practicum was at a residential treatment program. Another client really loved Kylo Ren and Anakin, and was like, I really want to be able to help Anakin, and what does Anakin need? And because he identified a lot with Anakin. So Star Wars specifically actually has been one of the like top fandoms that I will incorporate into therapy to build a rapport, because most people have some awareness of it, even if they're not like a super uber fan. They know something about it, and they can I can use the concepts to use psychoeducation. Like, okay, well, the dark side is all those like powerful emotions that we have. How do we manage them? How do we find a balance in the force for ourselves? I mean, I use Star Wars so much in my clinical work that I don't care what IRB says, they're wrong.
Well,
I
see,
mean,
that's
Star
the thing. I
Wars.
think
Okay.
sorry. So one of the things that I am hoping to be able to achieve with like all the content I'm putting out there is to normalize this as a culture. Because I come from like a different culture. My parents are Mexican, and I notice a lot of things that either we were taught in school or that were left out, because they're always like, oh, you have to be aware of the culture, and that's like, cultural competence. That's something that they pushed, and I was like, well, great, fantastic, but you do understand that geek culture is also a culture, right? Like there's so many of us, and everything's like slightly different, and it's something that is really deep and personal to a lot of us, and that's something that should be addressed or brought up in therapy, because sometimes we experience those toxic fandoms, right? And if the person who we are talking to about this doesn't really fully understand fandoms, or like how they can impact us and how important they are to our lives, then it can be a harmful sort of like relationship, and I can't connect with you anymore on this. Also, I always like, one of my first questions always to like all my clients is like, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? And that gives me an idea of what fandoms they're in, like things that I can use to engage them more in therapy. But yeah, like that's one of sort of like the Psychology for Geeks ultimate goals, is to make this a normal thing, because we are all geeks in some way or another. Like we mentioned sports earlier, those are sports geeks, and that's fine. Like we have, music geeks, we have theater geeks, we have geeks of all kinds, and that's fantastic. We all geek out about something, and we need that in our life for our mental health. Kelly, I totally interrupted you. You were gonna say
Oh,
something?
I have no idea what I was going to say. My brain's already choo-choo moved on to riffing off what you were saying. And one of my favorite trainings I've ever given was at the Maryland Psychological Association, and it was video games as a cultural competency. And we talked about games, and like if your client came in and really loved football, you would use that in your therapy. If they loved books, if they loved, Harry Potter, you would use that in your therapy. So when people come in loving video games, do we shut that down and say, that's bad, you shouldn't do that, that's not important, it's a waste of your time, it's frivolous, it's a childish, especially when they're talking to children, which blows my mind. And so, yeah, I mean, I can say, and I hope this is hopeful, because I definitely feel it that way, is that I got my doctorate 10 years ago. Oh, wow. That just hit. It has changed so much. When I was doing my dissertation research, like the only thing out there about video games and mental health was that they're bad. Like, and it obviously we have come so far in that amount of time. The amount of research in particular around using Dungeons and Dragons as part of group therapy, that has seen an absolute explosion in research. And so I feel like this is the natural expanding of that. We're taking these things that are really important to people, things that they're passionate about, whether it's games or Harry Potter, specific books, D&D, and we're finding ways to either use the inherent mechanics of something like Dungeons and Dragons, having my ADHD kids have to roll for initiative and wait their turn. That's just inherent in the gameplay. It's not something that I'm like, it's not chocolate covered broccoli. It's just part of what you need to do. And so I'm excited to see that it's expanding, because it does work. And I think when you break down that wall of, oh, well, geeks, people have a very specific thing in mind. But yeah, what if you're a music geek? What if you're a sports geek? We don't see that as a negative. And so really helping other clinicians break down this idea of what they think they know of, well, this is a good hobby and that's a bad hobby, or this is a valid culture versus this is an invalid culture. And I think it's really, really important to highlight, because if it's important to the person and you are not picking that up as a clinician and valuing it, then you're not going to do well. Like that's if you're invalidating something that's important to your client, you're not going to get anywhere, and they're not going to stick with you.
Well, and especially it's going to make seeking out therapy and mental health support that much harder for them down the line, because they're going to associate all therapists with your rejection. And consider, especially for geeks who maybe like the non-socially accepted fandoms, if you're not a sports geek or music geek or whatever, if that stereotypical geek, who likes video games and everything, society has probably told them growing up that that's bad. Their parents might have, said that that's bad.
Yep.
And so for you as a therapist to say, oh, well, let's do something different. Let's find something different. Like, you're just perpetuating that rejection. Like you said, they're not going to stick with you. So dropout is going to occur might even after occur that first session. But they might never seek out therapy down the line, especially when they might really need it for something else going on in their lives. And because they'll have this impression of therapists. They can say, oh, well, all therapists are just going to reject me. And it's really important, I think. I mean, I know nothing about sports, but I have a lot of clients that love sports. And so I will ask them, explain to me what is going on in this game that you love to watch. What is going on? Why do you like this, player? I don't understand the rules of the game. So I'm a blank canvas for you to express it to. And that helped a lot. I still don't know anything about sports. All I know, and this is a shout out to my friend Dr. Nicole Hassler, who was supposed to join us but couldn't. I only know that the Bills are a sports team. I am now obligated to like the Bills because she's my friend. I know that they have a really big fandom. The Bills Mafia is in that community. That is their fandom. And that's just as valid as people who go to Comic-Con dressed as Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. What is wearing the sports jersey if not cosplay?
Especially like cosplay, I feel like it's one of those fandoms that it's still, even within like the geek culture, is still kind of seen as, oh, you're spending that much money on something and you're pretending to be someone else when you're an adult. And it can have like a lot of negative repercussions, because if that's the one way that you feel like you can express yourself and you feel happy, and then people come and like trample over your dream, then it just feels horrible. But having that understanding, not only as therapists but also as fans, if you are a fan, like for example like a Star Wars fan, and you find yourself that you're judging another person for the way that they are expressing their love, or their passion for that fandom, then maybe that's when we will need to take a step back, because we talked earlier about what green flags to look for, when you want like a safe space for a fandom, but also if we want to do that for ourselves, we want to take that time to reflect, are we being a good influence to continue that positive environment of support, or are we being like a gatekeeper and like one of those people that's judging you? And like it's okay like to have like friendly banter of like, oh well, are you rooting for like the dark side instead of the light side? Like you can have those friendly competitions, but at a certain point you have to take it as it's a different perspective. And just because the dark side was portrayed as like the evil villains were a part of it, doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about this panel. We got sidetracked because I got interested in other things. But like that's what I wanted to talk about.
A bunch of nerds got sidetracked talking about things that they're nerdy about. What?
Who knew?
Never happens. So like I wanted to talk about how like connecting with a villain or a dark character or like the dark side doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person or that you're in the wrong. And it sounds, Ben, like you have this conversation before with some of your clients. Have you had this conversation as well, Kelli? Some clients?
I don't think not as directly. But the idea of like identifying with the villain definitely comes up. So I'll let Ben, since he's ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, so the way I look at it and the way I was kind of taught about it from Dr. Janina Scarlett's superhero therapy training is, that was actually the segment of the training was what to do if your client, identifies with the villain. Does that mean that they're going to be a psychopath? No. the question should be, what about this villain's personality or behavior is appealing to them? And for those two clients of mine, they liked Darth Vader and Kylo Ren and the Sith kind of culture in general because it allowed for expression of anger that they felt they were not allowed to express in their culture that they were raised in. And, you know, when we talk about like mental health and emotions, men in Western society, there's only certain emotions that we are allowed to express that is considered socially appropriate. It's, you know, angry, hungry, and horny. But even with anger, you're only allowed to express it in certain contexts, which is like if you're under attack. But some people struggle with anger that aren't in those contexts. Some people struggle with fear and anxiety that can lead to anger. So how do we explore those emotions in a way that helps the client understand what are their needs in that moment? All emotions have a purpose. They've evolved for a reason. They're neither good nor bad. Whenever clients will say the word, oh, bad emotion, I stop them and say, it's not a bad emotion, it's just an emotion. That the label bad is something that you labeled it as, that you judged it as. But actually, emotions start in the body before we even get to the cognitive identification of good or bad or whatever. So let's understand, what is our body trying to tell us? What do we need in this moment? And that's how I worked it in with those characters the clients who liked those characters. You know, Anakin and Kylo Ren, they would get angry. Well, let's look at those situations in which they were feeling that anger. What do you think they needed? How do you think they would have liked to be addressed? And I remember with the practicum when I was talking about with the client about Kylo Ren, because it's like a residential program, we could go for walks around the neighborhood and everything. And so we're going, there's a nice little trail to walk around. So I'm walking with this client to practice mindfulness, to practice breathing, and just to get out of the house. You know, it's stressful. And I'm just like, well, why don't you talk to me about, like, what do you think Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, would want to be addressed like? What is he might be thinking? And the client does such an amazing job of like, well, if I was Kylo Ren's therapist, this is what I would try to help him with, and this is how I would address him. I'm just like, dude, what do you need me for? Like, that was, yes, okay, so can we turn that to you now? Can you talk to yourself that way? And I think a lot of it, with regards to clients who identify with villains, is, I think it comes down to a lot of self-compassion too. It's hard for us to be nice to ourselves. And we see these villains who are doing these, you know, maybe violent things. And I'm not encouraging any clients to commit crimes, but they're expressing themselves and they don't care what other people think. And how can we kind of...
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah. So with like when you like those characters, you don't necessarily like what they're doing, or like all the evil things they're doing. It's like maybe their experiences that you're connecting with, or like the things that they stand for that you're connecting with. So it's not necessarily like the bad evil things that,
it's
they're
not
doing.
The violence. Yeah, it's not the violence or the criminality that the clients like. It's the fact that this person, this character, is feeling a certain way, which is a normal feeling, and they are allowed to express it. It's almost expected for villains to express those emotions in that way. And for a lot of people, you know, various different cultures, you know, make it hard for us to talk about our feelings. You know, Western culture is, you know, is becoming better about it, but it wasn't always this way, especially again when it comes to men and talking about feelings. And so, but it might also be the character's story, the character's upbringing, the character's experiences that this client is connecting with. And so the point is not, okay, well, let's do the same thing that Kylo Ren does and destroy shit. But let's say, okay, well, what is Kylo Ren feeling? Why might, what might be influencing those feelings? And if that's something that you're experiencing, okay, what is coming up for you? And how can we understand those experiences better? I have not, once had a client that, identified with a villain, and specifically because they wanted to do the same criminal acts. And I worked with parolees who had actually committed crimes, and none of them, even the ones that did like certain villain characters, it was not because of the crime. It was because this person had an experience that was similar to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing, I mean, across any fandom is to, at least as a therapist, is to really be curious. If your favorite Star Wars character is Kylo Ren, I want to know why.
Yeah.
Like, I might have guesses as to why, but I don't know. And if your favorite character is Obi-Wan, to me, that's just as telling, because whereas Sith can express feelings, if we look at the light side, it's messed up over there too.
Oh, yeah.
Like it is also destructive. And so it's this fantastic way to talk about extremes as being destructive, and that light side and dark side are both crappy.
Yeah.
And that what you find out, whether you take Vader's arc, like he ended up in the gray, like he was hardcore light and then he went hardcore dark and then he ended up in the gray. And you see a lot of the characters that are doing that. That's kind of where they end up if they're given a chance to explore it. And so to me, just having that curiosity. Yeah.
So this is where I'm gonna like totally abuse the fact that you're an expert on this. Can you like explain how Anakin ended up in the gray side?
Sure. So as a kid, he was 100% do-gooder. Like, I'm going to save the world. Here, Mom, go away, Watto, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's my best Anakin example.
That was a really impeccable impression. Just top notch.
Spot on.
There we go. Spot on. I'll take my award. Thank you. And then, as he gets older, he just wants to do right by Obi-Wan. Like he has this idea of who he is supposed to be. He is this chosen one. He is this ideal, this paragon of thought. And then when he starts to have very normal human experiences, he's told to ignore them. Very human emotions, to like the death of people he cares about. Like telling someone not to feel grief or not to feel anger over that, that's damaging as F. And then obviously we know that he eventually becomes Darth Vader, and he just goes around like force choking people and like chucking people out of airlocks and like decimating entire planets and committing mass genocide. Bad, very bad. Genocide, bad. Killing, bad. We can all agree on that, whatever side you're on, like killing, bad. And then at the end, though, he ultimately ends up killing the Emperor. Like he takes this person and he chucks a geriatric individual into a pit. And this is one of the ways that like, that's a really good description of what happens. Ultimately self-sacrificing for his child. And like basically kind of seeing the error of his ways. And so he did really horrible things, and that there's no excuse. Like, I don't think this is a redemption arc for him at all. But he, if he truly was evil, if he truly was the dark side that Palpatine saw him as, or we saw Darth Maul as, for example, he would not have saved Luke. He wouldn't have. Like, that's not within that ethos, that compassion, that caring for others, of sacrifice and putting others before yourself. That is not part of the Sith ethos. And so he backslid, still dark side. I'm not saying he's great, but like he took a step back into a more gray area. And because, I mean, gray is infinitely more complex. I mean, think about your hex codes. Think about white. It's all one letter number. And then you're black. It's all one. Wait, I think they're both letters. Anyway. But like once you start getting to grays, you start having combinations of letters and colors and numbers. And anyway, I'm a nerd with design. And so, but like that's the thing, it's more complex, and that's why those characters are more interesting. And so if someone is drawn to a very black and white character, a very light or dark character, I'm super interested to know about what it is that's underpinning your interest. What ideals are you seeing paralleled? What expressions are you identifying with, or possibly like wanting to identify with, and internalizes your own? And what does that say? So no matter what side of the spectrum on, if you are pushing to one of the extremes, it's incredibly important to understand that curiosity. I mean, I guess with anybody likes, but especially on this. Yeah, that curiosity is so core to a therapist, and never assume why someone likes what they like.
Yeah, and never assume that just because they like a certain thing that it means something else. Like,
yeah, no,
there's never any one meaning for anyone. I guess you can call it an archetype. I'm not a very Jungian trained, so I'm not going to talk much about archetypes. But like, there's never only one meaning to anything. And finding out, like, do you like this character because it personifies an ideal for you, or is it that you see a bit of yourself in his story, and is that a part of yourself that you don't like, or that you do like? All the above, right?
It's complicated.
It is complicated. All humans are complicated.
Go figure.
Go figure. It's why we have psychologists. If people were not complicated, we would not have jobs. So, but for my clients, especially when I was working with parolees, I would ask them a lot of times about any character that they might like. And not all of them had a lot of these kind of characters that they liked or whatever, so I'm not going to force it on them. Obviously, I'm not going to like tell me about Star Wars and they'd be like, "What the hell is Star Wars?" But like, if they like any character at all, I still want to know why, and because that gives us it allows clients to share about themselves in a way that they might not know how to share. How do we talk about ourselves and our likes, our dislikes, our personality, our perceptions of things, our feelings? These are not things that we're taught growing up in a lot of places. But I can tell you everything about Batman, and I can tell you everything about Anakin Skywalker and Kylo Ren and Luke and Obi-Wan. I can tell you about them. And if you're telling me about Obi-Wan and Anakin, then me as a therapist I'm listening to it as you're telling me about yourself through Obi-Wan and Anakin. They're just the vessel. That's just the metaphor. And that's the great thing about it is if you identify with the villain, cool. Tell me about the villain.
So I want to break this down a little bit because I want to like understand more from like the beginning. So what are some of the things that, let's say, the dark side like values? What are like the values of the dark side?
I'm gonna just pull up the codes right now. 1 second.
Not surprised. Delighted. Not surprised.
Hold on. Jedi, Sith, Gray, code. Hold on. I should just keep it on my computer at all times. You never know when I'm going to need it, right?
Getting tattooed?
I personally,
yes,
I'm very cringy about the ideas of tattoos. That's just me. I don't like the idea of needles coming near me, so I would not get it tattooed on me.
Don't worry, there's no judgment.
If you want to get it tattooed on you, go for it.
Oh no! Oh no!
But they do like the shirts that look like tattoo sleeves. You can get one of those.
I would do that.
Maybe, yeah. Then
or like lick it and then stick it. I would do those.
Oh yeah, one of the like temporary tattoos. Yeah, okay, I can do those. The temporary ones. Yeah. Okay, so the code as you see it. So the Sith code. It says, peace is a lie, there's only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The force shall set me free. I don't know if anyone else has the same problem with the ad blocker coming up. But in the Jedi code, it says there is no emotion.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let's see with that one first. So I heard power and passion, right? Is there like a major word that I missed from that?
Okay, so yes, well, it goes through like it goes through like goes from passion to strength to power to victory. So the way I interpret the Sith code, and this is just me, is their strength comes from their passion, from their emotions, and that strength, that passion, that their emotions give them the power to gain victory in life. And through that victory, the chains that have been holding them back that they perceived is broken. And of course, this all comes from the Force, because the Force is all. And so the way I see the Sith code is my emotions are what give me strength. And this is how I can break these chains that I see are holding me back in life, whether it be societal chains, familial chains, physical chains. You know, my emotions, my passion for things is what gives me the strength and power to gain victory.
And I
The
think
only thing
go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, but it's only the powerful, what we might consider unpleasant emotions, because the Sith are not happy. They don't really do joy. They don't really encourage empathy or sorrow or grief.
Yeah.
Like when they say passion, they're typically
yes.
talking.
They take the grief, but the term of the grief
only
is
through anger,
else.
though. Yeah, like it's okay to experience grief, but then you have to crush it down and condense it into a rage, into anger. And that's exactly Anakin's arc. And so what's so interesting is that they say, oh yeah, we're all about letting loose and to become free. But they're still just as restrictive on emotion as the Jedi are. It's just they flop which emotions are acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think when we talk about emotions for humans, at least, I don't know about the other species in the Star Wars galaxy, how they, I don't know how Wookiees experience emotions.
Intensely.
I would really like to learn some Wookiee psychology, but that'll have to come later on. But for humans in our real world, those kind of emotions that we label as bad are those really intensely physically powerful emotions. Because as I said before, emotions are physiological. Our body is experiencing them. And oftentimes, those emotions, anger and anxiety and fear, they have the most intense physiological impact on us. I would argue, not for the Sith, but just in general, that the other emotions like joy and love can be just intense. They're intense in a different way. We feel them in different parts of our body, and so they don't feel as powerful because it's a different part of our body. But they're just as powerful. I mean, we're looking at a mother holding a son. That's love. Love is a very powerful.
I promise you. It's a very powerful emotion.
Very
I would
powerful
absolutely fight a Sith. I would throw hands with a Sith to protect this baby.
Absolutely. But because the emotion of love is experienced differently in our body, it's not as like sharply focused as anger, right? And so the Sith, they kind of disregard that, because if it's not something that's sharply focused that they can weaponize, then they don't
there's
want to
also
use it.
something to say about their interpretation of power, right? Because feeling an intense love can give you power. It's just it might not feel it as intensely in the body, but also when you are projecting it, it's different. It's not destructive. It doesn't seem as powerful as like other emotions like anger, because it's more visible. Like when someone is angry, you see, like, visibly see in their expression, in their face, and sometimes there is a path of destruction in their wake. But when you see love, those like those signs are more subtle. And we, as a survival mechanism, we notice the negative things first, right? So when we think about, I also think about, like, when we think about power, a lot of the times we're like, oh, so the people in power often do bad things, so power is not good, right? So there is a lot of like what is it, like stereotypes about like these emotions and even the words in the code, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it all goes again back to, well, this is their code. They're wording it this way because they want to handle things for their goals, right? The goal of the Sith is to defeat the Jedi and conquer the galaxy. Feelings of love and joy are not as targeted. They're not as visible and pointed as anger and rage and whatnot. And so if they're like, well, if I can't use that one to meet my needs right now, then they don't want to use it. So I would say that a lot of the emotions, the powerful emotions that come up, that the Sith value, anger it's in the response to meet a need in the moment, like right now. Love is an emotion that meets a need, but longer term.
And
It
it's
meets the need
also
of
a
connection.
weakness.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is they tend to devalue emotions, which could be used against you. So like the whole reason that Anakin turned to the dark side was his love for Padme. Like that's the whole thing. And if the Jedi had just let him love her, it wouldn't have happened. And so in this case, both sides have been like, forbidden emotion, shame, shame, shame. And then bad things happen when we repress all of that. And so, yeah, and also keeping in mind that when we're talking about the unpleasant feelings, rage, anger, guilt, shame, sadness, we're talking about things that are releasing in our body, things like cortisol. Stress hormones are literally being released when we're having these unpleasant experiences. And those can be really strong because we want to avoid unpleasant experiences. But when we're having a pleasurable experience, like my child rocking my computer, or like love and hugs and that kind of stuff, you're releasing oxytocin. And guess what? When you're filled with oxytocin instead of cortisol, you really don't want to go to war. You really don't want to chop somebody in half. Like these are things that lead to contentment and community, as opposed to emotions that are more destructive. Doesn't mean they're bad. As I always like to point out to my clients, anger is your body letting you know that there's something unfair. Something unjust is happening, and we need to do something about it. This is not fair. This is not okay.
Yeah.
They also tend to be the less rational. I mean, as if any emotion is rational. Maybe more easily weaponized. I always think about the Sith as fascism. Like you rule through fear. So they understand emotions and they want to use them to their benefit. They're manipulative in that. Use your anger, use your grief. They literally say, use your anger. Whereas on the other side, they're like, don't have any. It's like stoicism. Don't have feelings. Feelings are worthless and not worth your time. And like, will deflect from the mission. And they're both harmful. I will say fascism is more harmful historically. Don't want to.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about the Jedi.
So I would argue the Jedi, is a very like restrictive cult also, and cults are not good too.
Yeah, cults are bad.
Very cultish. Yeah. So what's the Jedi code then?
Okay, so the Jedi code. Now my computer's like slow. Okay, the Jedi code is saying there's no emotion, there's peace. There is no ignorance, there's knowledge. There is no passion, there's serenity. There is no chaos, there's harmony. There's no death, there's the Force. So the way I'm reading
those are not
this,
opposites.
They're not opposites. First of all, they're really not. Like the opposite of emotion is not peace. The opposite of like what? But they're let's look at it.
It's just a lot of denying. Like,
it's a lot of
you know
denial.
what it reminds me? Like it's very gaslighty, culty thing. They're like,
culty.
nope, not that.
Because if you really think about it, they're saying, oh, we should only be peaceful. We should only seek knowledge and serenity and harmony. It sounds nice, right? Oh yeah, peace is good, right? Serenity, good. We like those things. They sound nice. What does that look like? What is like? That's not tangible, right? Like it's granted, no emotion is tangible, but like anger is something that we can like physically do with. I don't know how to how do I do peace? How do I feel peace? Like
but also that's different too, right? Because someone can be peaceful listening to like, the hardest like metal band out there, and it will be like chaos to someone like me, and like it will be different. Like I could be like, maybe I enjoy more classical music, and that's my inner peace. Like peace is like the definitions of peace are like so biased.
Subjective. It's all subjective. But the problem that we see with the Jedi and the way that they talk about these things is it's denial. Like what Kelly says, like, oh no, emotion's not helpful. We should only be peaceful. They define peace as an absence of emotion. You know, and I'm going to bring in the Star Trek thing again. So, you know, come at me, bros. But like, do you think about like the absence of emotion? They're like, oh, Vulcans, they have no emotion. There's only logic. Vulcans have emotions. They have really strong emotions. They just don't emote. They don't, you know, show it on their affect. They feel it. They struggle to manage their emotions using logic, which I kind of see in like the Jedi sometimes. They're like, oh, well, no, we need to, you know, be without emotion so you can think clearly about things. I would argue to, you know, if I was to come face to face with a Jedi Council member who's saying that, I'd be like, I would argue that, you know, our emotions guide our problem solving abilities and, you know, is telling us something that's important. We have these emotions for a reason. You know, if something is
It's
making
like
us
denying
angry,
a piece of yourself. Like you
yeah,
can't be like a complete whole of a person and like reach that like peace or inner peace or whatever if you're denying like a huge chunk of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think about like the prequels and stuff, and like the way they treated Anakin, and like, oh, I sense much fear in this one, and da 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 da. Like, okay, well, maybe it's the therapist in me, but can we talk about why? Can
yeah,
we explore this further? To use the phrase, you know, can we unpack this a little bit? Can we process? But because the absolute denial of emotion it's a massive vulnerability.
mhm,
And, you know, if people had listened to, like, I get wanting to be guided by logic and reason. I mean, given the source material that Star Wars comes out of, like, that was in a very big moment of like stoicism and intellectualism and enlightenment, where these kinds of ideas are coming from, where our
mhm,
logical brain can triumph over our emotional brain, which is
yeah,
kind of how this is set up as. But you know, as psychologists and mental health professionals, we know that there is no triumphing of one over the other. They exist not always in harmony, but they need each other, because without emotion, there's nothing going on. We miss out on so many cues about ourselves and our safety and our environment and the people around us. And without logic and reason, we act like small humans who are
mhm,
jumping off of things and hitting their heads and going to the ER. It's like, how has the species continued to survive? And you need both. And I think that's why when you see these characters that are at one pole or the other, there is that denial. There is
mhm,
something of themselves that they're absolutely not being allowed to express. And again, maybe it's different for different species in the universe. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not an exobiologist by any means, but at least for the humans, hi, sweetheart, at least for the humans, like, you need to be able to have those experiences. And just having an emotion does not mean that you're going to react on that emotion, but it is the denial that it's not okay to feel what you are feeling that causes so much harm, so much damage. He's agreeing again. Okay, Connor, please stop.
Well, you know, because I'm thinking back, okay, one of my favorite characters, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I love Ewan McGregor, but is Obi-Wan. And I'm like, he was like super emotional, like almost in every scene. He was like always worried. He was always like feeling something. And so clearly, like, and again, there was like this sort of like judgment too with the
mhm,
Jedi Council, where it was like certain emotions are kind of like more okay than others,
mhm,
right? Because a lot of them will get like angry and passionate about things, you know. They're like, clearly they were like expressing some sort of emotion. So I was like, that's kind of like, why are you like over here like shunning Anakin for being afraid? But also, I feel like, did they ever do anything to like make him feel better and not afraid? They were just like, "No, child, you're bad because you know you're scared all the time. Stop it. Stop being afraid." Okay,
Imagine a
that's
child being taken from his mother across the world, across space and time, as like a 7 or 8 year old. And how dare he be afraid? Geez, what's wrong with him?
yeah. Well, I
yeah,
mean, and that's the whole point as to why they take children much younger when they're basically like infants and toddlers when they don't have those attachments, because then you can raise them to only like feel in certain ways and to experience things in a certain way. They wanted that control. But you're right, Elizabeth. They would, you know, they would criticize Anakin for feeling certain feelings, but praised Obi-Wan for similar feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But because they came from different places, I think, you know, whereas Obi-Wan, I would say, yeah, he had a lot of worry. And so, well, yeah, Anakin was worried too, but Anakin expressed it more as like, okay, I'm going to do whatever I need to. You know, he was very much a go-getter. And, well, that's not very contemplative. That's not very peaceful. Whereas Obi-Wan was worried, but he would talk things out. And he would be like, okay, well, yeah, I'm worried, but I shouldn't be worried. I'm going to meditate, and okay, now I can suppress my emotion. That was what they tried to do for Anakin wherever he was feeling this way. I mean, there was a whole, scene where Anakin is sitting with Yoda, and Yoda is trying to be like, okay, you need to meditate and let go of these emotions. That how do Yoda? Like I really okay, Yoda's name comes from the Hebrew word to know, which is Yodea. He doesn't know. He's just saying things. He's not teaching. He's not explaining. Okay, well, how do I, let go of these emotions? In real life, we can let go of emotions by processing them, by acknowledging that they exist, and giving ourselves space to feel them, so that the intensity of the feeling is not going to be as strong. It's but in the Star Wars galaxy, it's like, no, just push it all down.
Well, but
I'm
I
still
think I will
completely
argue.
distracted. Sorry, I'm just completely distracted still by the idea of a bunch of 2-year-olds and then thinking you shouldn't have emotions, because that's how old my kiddo is right now, and I can guarantee you, try to have an
But
unemotional
if
2-year-old.
if those 2-year-olds are raised in an environment where no emotions are expressed, so
Do you
those
have a 2-year-old?
I don't, but I would imagine
What
that
methods
it's
did you use to ensure that these kiddos would not express any emotions? That's what I'm wondering now.
they're teaching them. They're not getting rid of emotions. They're teaching the 2-year-olds to not express emotion. And
Again, I'm
I
giggling at the idea of how that would look, because it's not.
I don't know either.
Other than like punishment, and even then, they're going to be really ragey about it. We're very much in the teenager rager stage, so yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what happened with Anakin, right? But I mean, that's what I will argue, because when I watched Obi-Wan, I got this sense where he had this very much of like, oh, he felt guilty for like what happened to Anakin, because he didn't feel like he was like a good master. And I was like, well, yeah, because you didn't really know what the teachings were, so how could you teach it to someone else if he didn't fully understand it? And like it was like the whole council just needed to watch Inside Out. That's what they needed to do.
They did.
It would have solved
trauma.
so many problems
Hooray.
if they just watched that movie.
Just spin all down in the grand convocation chamber of the Jedi Council. It'd be like, movie time, everybody. Get your popcorn. We're watching Inside Out.
Okay, so now both are wrong. Both have things that are good, both things that have bad. But what about the gray side? Is that like the superior one, you would say? What's the code for the gray?
Well, so there's
Jedi?
no one specific code for the gray, because it's actually, even in Legends, there's been different like interpretations of it. But one of the more common codes that are ascribed to the gray, because again, the gray Jedi are not an organized group. So there's no real like code per se. So what I'm going to read is just something that some fan came up with. It never showed up in Legends novels that I am aware of. If some other fan listening to this knows exactly where it is in Legends, please let me know. I will go back and read it over again. But the one I see here is saying, there's no dark side nor light side. There's only the Force. I will do what I must to keep the balance. There's no good without evil, but evil must not be allowed to flourish. There is passion, yet peace. There's serenity, yet emotion. There's chaos, yet order. So I mean, a lot of times when people talk about the Gray Jedi, it's specifically okay. Let me go back. When I talk about the Gray Jedi, because I can only speak for myself, I talk about the Gray Jedi as someone who is able to acknowledge the dark while still strive towards the light. Someone who can acknowledge, yes, you know what, I am having some emotions, but I will strive to manage them in a more peaceful manner. My friend Nicole Haskler, she talks about it like in the DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy model of the wise mind, the emotional mind, the rational mind. Whereas the emotion mind is the Sith, which is yay emotion, and the Jedi would be the logical mind, which is no emotion, just logic. The wise mind would be the gray, which is okay, we have both. How do we then like balance it?
And I think balance is the key word there. And that's, again, that embodies a lot of, you don't want to deny yourself the things in you that bring value. And that can get really tough because we value different things. Different cultures value different things. We're told that some things are acceptable and some things are not. And so finding that balance within yourself, within your own culture, within your own context, like if you can find someone who is balanced, I do not claim to be that person. I'm on the teeter-totter, but I try not to go to the extremes. And I think that would be my want for the middle ground, is not that it is a static thing, but rather a constant balancing act of trying to manage these different influences, either emotion, thought, spirituality, whatever it is, like having to try and find this balance between different things that are sometimes in conflict with each other. And it is a continual act. It's not someplace you ever get. It's something that you get up every day and you work for. So like kind of like the opposite of perfection. It is just getting up every day and then doing the work that aligns with your values.
Because we went through a lot, and I feel like in order for us to continue geeking out, we would need about 1,000 more of these panels for us to get everything that we want out there, and maybe then we'll steal a few extra. So okay, so that's kind of what I understood the first time that I did a little bit of research on what each of the codes were. And then so I understood that it was sort of like more, the gray side was more sort of like on the balance side of the other two. But now I'm curious because I kind of heard comments here and there online about how Ahsoka was supposed to be like a gray Jedi. Is that like something you both agree with, or kind of not really?
So in the current canon, they define gray as just someone who's not like a part of the Jedi Order.
Oh, okay.
And so they
So pretty
define
much
it a little
everyone
bit
else?
different. Basically, any Force user who is like not a dark side, so she's still a light side. She still is, more light side, but she's not aligned with the Jedi Order anymore. She left the
Okay.
Jedi Order. So I wouldn't say that her philosophy is very gray, though there are elements of it that I actually do see some gray side where she's like, it's okay to feel these emotions, but let's try to like do things differently, I guess. But we haven't really seen too much of it, I guess. So it is just defined differently. The concept of the Great Jedi came about through legends, and specifically as a group of Force users that rejected either side and strived to be in balance with the Force, both the light and the dark.
Are there any characters sort of like that are more like known in the like video games or in the movies or shows that are more sort of like in the gray side?
Not like
I mean,
officially.
the video games are hard because you get to choose your options. You can be as dark or as light as you want.
I mean, I personally would actually argue that Qui-Gon Jinn is fairly gray, because he never said in the first movie, he never really told Obi-Wan or Anakin to not feel their feelings. He just said, be mindful of your feelings. So he was trying to be present with the feelings. And in a lot of the kind of the Legends novels and non-canon stuff, he was shown to kind of be a little bit more open to having feelings and doing things in a different way than the Jedi Order. So I guess he could be considered gray.
I mean, he's the one who said that Anakin should be trained. He went against the council on that. And there were several instances where he diverged from what they kind of ordered him to do because he decided to go with the spirit of the mission rather than like the letter of the mission.
Yeah. Here's a more reform versus orthodox interpretation of the Force.
I keep thinking like the extremes are like organized religion and like gray is like spiritual. Like, I'm sorry.
So would you consider Obi-Wan to be more like, I guess towards the end of his life, to be more of like a gray Jedi, or did he still like strive to stay within like the light code?
I think he still strived really to try to be in the light code, but he struggled at the end because he was feeling all that guilt and shame, and he didn't know what to do with it. And so he isolated. Spoiler alert, that's not healthy coping.
It didn't work for him, right?
It didn't.
It's not going to work for us.
Yeah, so I don't think I would say that Obi-Wan is gray. He never really accepted the emotions. He would feel them, but he would shame himself for feeling them. So
again, there's a lot of the intergenerational stuff, because he was trying to live up to the Jedi that Qui-Gon was or wanted him to be, his perception of what Qui-Gon wanted him to be. And training Anakin was, of course, like his way of showing his love to, his father figure, even though that was misguided and, we can never be our parents. And sometimes it's a good thing. And then in like the Obi-Wan series, I remember one of the most impactful things that sat with me was him in the line, like in the very first episode when the guy in front of him got completely stiffed in terms of payment, and he just sat there and took it. And I'm like, who are you and what have you done? Because this is not my Obi-Wan. That's fun of it. That's fun of it, to see that.
He was numbed. He was
checked out, completely checked out.
Because the emotions were too much for him. And so he just shut down. And that is an actual, thing that happens with people when we are going through such trauma that we might just numb ourselves and we might just check out. But I think that with Obi-Wan, he also went into teaching Anakin. He didn't want to teach Anakin. He did it out of a sense of obligation to Qui-Gon.
He took over mom and pop's shop, even though he didn't want to.
And that can be very, challenging then, because how can he then be fully present with Anakin when some part of him is resenting Anakin? And I think
so. I don't want to take too much of both of your times, because I could just keep asking questions and we'll be here forever. So if anyone is interested in reaching out to you guys or checking out some of your stuff, where can people find you? Or what projects are you working on that you would like to call attention to?
Unfortunately, the stuff I'm working on will already have happened by the time this is released. So no point in me mentioning that. But people can find me through my two different podcasts. Mental Health Quest, we're on Spotify and Apple and iHeartRadio and Amazon, I think. Social media for Mental Health Quest is Facebook, X, and Instagram at MHQ Podcast. My Hero Therapy, again, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. Social media is at My Hero Therapy on Facebook, X, and Instagram.
Sorry, we as we are approaching upon the almost dinner hour, we're becoming more demanding with our snacks and our juice. So thank you so much for your patience. And I apologize to anybody who's watching with my shaky cam. I promise this is not Blair Witch. It's just motherhood. In terms of myself, you can find me. I pretty much live on the Take This Discord. So again, Take This, and now the dog's getting in on it. So discord.gg/takethisorg is our Discord site. I am there all the time. I'm the community manager. So I pretty much live there. You can also check out takethis.org, which is our main website. We have tons of mental health resources, from like therapist directories to a series on content creator burnout and what to do about it. And on socials, you can find me on, if it's still around, Twitter. It's at Kelli N Dunlap. So Kelli, the letter N, and then DUNLAP. Or if you're on Blue Sky, it's at Kelli Dunlap, because I got in early and didn't need to use my middle name. Yeah, those are the spaces where you can find me. And yeah, thank you so much for having us on. This was super delightful. And as I mentioned before we started recording, this is my first Star Wars specific. Oh goodness, help. Okay, I'm done. I'm gonna mute. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna do my part. If this is the first panel that you've seen, I remember I forgot to introduce myself. Earlier, I was just like, "Oh, you guys are awesome. You guys should do it first." And then I was like, "Oh, I don't know." Okay." So my name is Elizabeth, and I created Psychology for Geeks, and we are becoming a nonprofit. So hopefully, by the time this video comes out, we will fully be a nonprofit, and that would be fantastic. And you can check us out on Twitch. We are on social media at Psych4Geeks. We're all, like, you're probably watching this on YouTube, so please check out some of other videos. We have podcasts where we talk about One Piece and Avatar: The Last Airbender, and a bunch of other panels that I've done with other people, and interviews where I interviewed other mental health professionals about how they got started in their sort of geek journey and how they include like geek elements into their own practice. So that is it for this panel today. But I would love to do a lot more. So if you guys have any ideas of what fandoms you would like us to discuss, or like specific things that you would like to know about the psychology of like Star Wars, or anything you'd like us to discuss, let us know in the comments. All right. And
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right, Ben, are you ready? We're going to use the Force here. I'm going to send you the message. Okay, ready? May the Force be with you. You say always.
Always.
Okay, let's try it again. Ready? Okay,
This is the way.
Okay. May the Force be with you.
Always.
Yes.
Awesome. And also, don't forget to reframe it and re-enchant your life.